Hello and welcome, guys. Thank you for joining me again for another Facebook Live. Also, I want to give thanks to those that join me on the replay from our YouTube channel and or SoundCloud. Tonight, we're starting our series on suffering in silence. We're starting our weekly series on suffering in silence. So we're going to take this series out for the remainder of the week. So for the remainder of this week, we're going to be discussing some of the areas in which we women are suffering in silence or have suffered in silence. Now, when I bring up this topic, I think that it's necessary because we women deal with so many complex issues, trying to hold everything together, but yet there are some areas of our lives where we feel like we are going at this all alone. And so this is where I get the title of the topics for this series, Suffering in Silence. So as you join me tonight, please go ahead and like and share this video. Tonight, I'll try to keep it a little brief, and then we'll come back tomorrow and jump right in. Now, one of the areas of our lives where we women tend to suffer in silence is when it comes to the issues of childhood abuse or childhood neglect. There are many women, adult women, who have suffered years and years without ever publicly letting it be known that as a child they were violated and or abused. And when this happens, even though we look like we're fulfilled in our relationships and it looks like we're fulfilled in our careers, look like our family and everything is all together, there are still some areas to where if we are abused as a child, that little child still lives within us throughout our adult life. And what that does, when we continue to hide the issue, when we continue to suppress the trauma, and we continue to neglect to deal with the issues associated with the childhood abuse, what that does is that fear, that bitterness, that trauma that we suffered as a child continues to make decisions for us in our adulthood. So that child that was violated or that child that was abused never goes anywhere. She's still there. She wakes up with you. She get dressed with you. She go to work with you. And sometimes I feel like we suffer in this silence because we feel ashamed attached to it. And also, we have a sense that we are the only one. We are the only one that has been victimized, or we are the only one that has ever suffered through such trauma. And because we keep this type of information silent, it causes the cycle to continue. So therefore, when our baby girls are growing up and experiencing life and being violated, they feel like that they have no one that they can talk to or turn to. So they hold it inside as well. You see how the cycle continues. So, ladies, I encourage you that you no longer have to suffer the pain or the trauma of childhood abuse or neglect in silence. It's time to give a voice to the things that have us stuck in life. It's time to give a voice to that little girl that never had her say, or that continues to live in that fear, or continues to live in that guilt. It's time to find our voice, because when we hold silent, it keeps us in a sense of feeling shameful. There's a stigma or a shame associated with that. And a lot of it has to do with the culture and time in which we were brought up, or a culture and time in which we live. That was just something that you did not talk about. If something happened in the family, it stayed in the family. So now, here we are, generation later, or generations later, because we even have parents or older adults older than we are, that the cycle continues. So if we continue to be silent, where does that leave the generation under us, and the generation under them, and the generation to come? So this is my purpose for the Suffering in Silence series, and this is why I wanted to just start out on a note, reaching back to touch that little girl that's inside, to let her know that it's okay to speak her truth. Because we don't want to go another generation after generation after generation with little girls losing their voice before they even realize how much they matter. We don't want another little girl to suffer. Think about our kids and our grandkids and their kids and their kids. The cycle can be broken, but we cannot break it by continuing to live in the silence of our pain, to live in the silence of our fear. Did you know that 1 in 3 women have been violated or traumatized, even from way back into their childhood? Now that's 1 in 3. So think about the organizations you're involved in and the women that are gathered there. Think about that religious institution that you attend on Sunday mornings. Think about that classroom that you attend Monday through Friday. Think about that job that you go to 40 hours a week, and the women that are there. 1 in 3. So in most cases, that means if there are 12 people in the room and 1 in 3 have been violated as a child, abused, molested, raped, you're not the only one in the room. But oftentimes, when we come together, as women, we know that we have all these issues, and so many things a lot of times are just dying to come out, screaming inside to give that little girl a voice. And yet we remain silent. But did you know all it takes is just for one out of that group to stand up and be the voice? before it gives others courage to stand up and say, I was a victim, but I'm no longer going to be that victim anymore. I'm no longer going to stay silent. This cycle of childhood abuse or neglect or trauma, it stops with me. I'm not going to let another through my lineage grow up and suffer through this pain. So you guys think about it. The next time you're in a room, and you're in a room where there's women around, whether it's in your churches, whether it's in your classrooms, whether it's on your job, 1 in 3. So we know if it's 3 of us, we know we're the one. But what about when there's 6 of us? Then we're not alone. So I encourage you tonight to think about it. Think about what that would do for your life to give that little girl inside of you a voice to say, I've been a victim too long, but today I'm going to let that little girl rest in peace, and I'm going to be the woman that I was created to be. And if it takes me telling my story to save another little girl or another young woman from having to grow up and live in fear and live watching over her shoulder and suffer from relationship to relationship before she's able to get it right, if it takes me just standing up and just giving her the voice that maybe she's not strong enough to have right now, that I'm going to be that one. I refuse to suffer in silence any longer. I refuse to let another little girl spend another day living in fear or developing unhealthy sexual behaviors because of the fear and the trauma that she's faced. We can no longer stay in silence, guys. 1 in 3. So being that I see you watching, I see the numbers, I see the comments, then that lets me know if it's 1 in 3, then I am not alone. There's at least one other on the side of this platform that's listening to my voice right now that also suffers in silence. I encourage you to find your voice. I encourage you to let that little girl have her say. And I encourage you to no longer suffer in silence. Because I stand with you. You are not alone. I appreciate you guys joining me tonight. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave it in the comments section. I'll be glad to address it with you guys. And I appreciate you sacrificing so much of your time to join me every night here on Facebook Live. I'll meet you here again tomorrow night at 10 p.m. for another session of Suffering in Silence. Thank you, guys.